Time for our final panel discussion of the day. Those of you involved in the football industry, and others doubtless too, will be aware of the game's hot topic as it involves spectator comfort and safety. The wish of large numbers of fans to stand to watch their team, and so many of them do, of course, despite their allocated seats and the urging of stewards for them to sit in them. Alongside this runs a Premier League consultation programme with its clubs on the topic, but also, as I mentioned earlier, we know that the government is not yet minded to move away from all-seater stadiums. You'll also be aware, I'm sure, that Celtic Football Club installed a section of rail seating for the start of this season as a means of addressing safety concerns around persistent standing. It provides very nearly 3,000 places. Scotland is not, you'll probably know, subject to the all-seater requirement that exists in England and Wales. Persistent standing is a challenging issue that clubs have been trying to tackle for many years, and they've met with varying degrees of success. Standing in seating areas presents a challenge to safety as well as to the customer service, especially as some fans are forced to stand in order to see the pitch when others are on their feet in front of them. So to discuss this, and I'd like you to come up as I mention your names if you wouldn't mind, we're joined once again by Ken Scott, Chief Inspector of the Sports Ground Safety Authority, Sheila Roberts, Safety Advisory Group Chair at Newham Council, which oversees, of course, safety at the London Stadium, home to West Ham, but also to the World Athletics Championships this coming summer. And also Ronnie Hawthorne is here, Head of Safety, Security and Operations at Celtic Park. Ronnie, you're very welcome. And also Sharon Chico, Chair of the Football Safety Officers Association and Head of Safety, incidentally, at Arsenal Football Club. So, thanks for joining us up here. And I suppose the way we might kick this off is just to ask you in turn a kind of mission statement. Why don't we start with you, Sheila? A mission statement on persistent standing and how you approach the issue.
What I'd like to say really is it's not just about public safety, it's about public order, but more importantly, it's really about visitor experience. I think at the London Stadium, a lot of the visitor experience and public safety issues have had a lot of attention in the media. It was almost inevitable that there would be issues because the capacity's gone up by 21,000, the number of season ticket holders has gone up by ×3. There are now 15,000 family tickets, 10,000 youth tickets. So I think that the issue of persistent standing was always going to be an issue, more so here with young people, with more family groups, where like-minded people may not necessarily sit together than it was in the Boleyn Stadium. But what as a regulator we look at is really the impact. It's not persistent standing on its own, it's really whether or not there are aggravating features that go along with that persistent standing. Mm-hmm. So that could be aggressive behaviour, insulting behaviour, it could be throwing missiles, it could be inciting other people to stand. It's really about the impact and the aggravation around it.
Well, we'll drill down into more detail on that later. Ken, you're next.
Yeah, I think as you alluded to, Rob, persistent standing's been around for a long time now, and you can chart it back to the advent of all-seater stadia following the report by Lord Justice Taylor into Hillsborough. In the early days, it was more manageable because it wasn't as prevalent as it is now. So I can remember in my former life as a SAG chair in Sunderland, knowing the 6 teams that would bring fans to that venue, to the Stadium of Light, and those fans would persistently stand. Sadly, since then, it's gone a little bit awry, and you could almost say every club in the Premier League has an issue now with people persistently standing in seated areas. As an organisation, the Sports Ground Safety Authorities produce guidance in collaboration with other stakeholders, so that includes the football authorities, local authorities, to look towards solutions to solving the problem. The big problem is that I think that we need to regroup to re-identify the risks that are associated with that, because we, in the documentation, identify 3 key areas. One clearly is safety. The other is a customer care issue, which you alluded to in your introduction, in that if the person in front stands, the person behind has no choice. And the third one is clearly to make sure that there is clear, unobstructed access onto and off the seating deck in the case of stewards, police, or whoever needing to be on to attend to whatever the situation is. I think where we are now is that we've kind of looked at it as one of those problems that is in the too difficult to manage box. And so many clubs and local authorities are looking at the keeping of the aisles clear as being, if you like, a solution, when in reality it's not. For me, and certainly for the Sports Ground Safety Authority, I think what we need to do is to re-emphasise the issues, the risks around persistent standing. And going back to what Aoife said there in her closing summary, is that to start to look at doing things ahead of something seriously going wrong. In other words, to be proactive rather than reacting to someone being injured or sadly maybe losing their life.
Yes. I'd like to come back to you later and ask you what is so dangerous about persistent standing. But let's go to Ronnie now and the view from Celtic.
I think for us, it was fundamentally a safety issue. It was an identified hazard and the risk associated with the hazard, identified by Celtic as a club and also by our safety advisory group. So having identified it, what we're going to do about it, in our view, there was no match-day solution to it. Large numbers of people standing in seated areas, persistently standing in seated areas, was a problem that couldn't be solved in our experience. I don't know if we all share this, but it couldn't be solved by stewards on the day of the match. So we had to look around, but we also were aware that not only was safety a driver, but also giving fans what they wanted was a driver. So this idea that we talk about, and I'm very much a supporter of it, this integrated safety, security and service. Because if the fans buy into the concept of safety, you're more than halfway there in delivering it. So not only are you making the situation safer, but you're giving fans what they want.
Yeah. And Sharon?
Yeah, so for the safety officer is really the person stuck in the middle. The safety officer is there to ensure that the regulations are upheld and that the stewards do what they're asked to do. However, we find, as Ronnie just alluded to, that is really, really problematic. Our clubs are always looking at ways to meet the fans' demands that are seen as reasonable, but also within a safe and secure environment. And there's always going to be that conflict. While we're currently in the situation that we're in, and as you know, as we've said already, that we're in that too difficult pile to deal with. We're actually really creating a bigger problem, because now we're finding that more and more fans want to stand. Yes. Legislation doesn't allow fans to stand. Stadium design currently doesn't allow fans to stand. And really the problem is not being addressed. So for the point of the safety officer, they really are in a no-win situation.
Now, can I ask an idiot's question really? Why is standing in a seated area, why is it dangerous? Why is it a threat to safety?
Do you want me to take
Yeah.
The reason why we consider it to be unsafe is that we have people standing in an uncontrolled environment, and it is potential. The potential is that if at times of excitement someone leans forward and maybe jumps or lands on the person in front, it is possible to induce what we call a progressive crowd collapse.
Has it ever happened?
There have been occasions when it has happened. I think one of the key issues in all of this is that, and the thing that keeps coming back to me and to the Sports Ground Safety Authority, if you like, as a counter-argument, is, well, show me the statistics. Show me where people have been injured, seriously injured, as a consequence of that. And I think that gets beneath it requires us to get beneath the reporting of accidents at sports grounds, because I think quite often, I don't believe for 1 minute that there aren't accidents in sports grounds that aren't attributable to people persistently standing in seated areas. But because they aren't presented with that when the accident is being reported, then we never get beneath that layer to identify what is, the accident, what's the statistic around that. But generally, I often go back to, well, why is it unsafe? And kind of turn the question around. And that, we have people standing in upper tiers of sports grounds. In some cases, it's 34 degrees. It's quite steep. Yep. In fact, some of the upper tiers are so steep that for people to walk up, clubs have introduced the grab rails because people are unsteady. And yet they walk along the row, they get the position in the seat, in the seating area, and then stand without any protection in the event of someone landing on their back and the progressive crowd collapse. But I turn the question around quite often to say, well, all right then, if I was to present to you the design for a new venue that suggested that we have terraces where the gradient is 34, 35 degrees, we aren't proposing to put any barriers in, but I'll tell you what else we're going to do. We're going to put seat backs in front, which are a nice little trip hazard should the person stumble. What would you think of me? You'd think I was mad for suggesting it.
Okay. Well, it would be the elephant in the room if we didn't talk about your rail seating at Celtic, Ronnie. So give us a little bit of a brief synopsis of how you came to that decision and what benefits, assuming you do think there are benefits, in it at the moment.
Well, I should have probably brought some sort of visuals to let you see it, but some of you already know the concept. Basically a steel seat with a 900mm bar built into the seat itself. The seat can be locked up, permanently locked up when it's in standing mode, but what you end up with is a continuous rail at 900mm in front of the spectator and likewise behind the spectator from the row of seats behind. We haven't increased the capacity in that area, quite the opposite, because we've lost some seats. But having said that, we do feel we've made the investment into safety. So fundamentally, you have a seat, as the name suggests, and if you don't sit in the seat because it's not in seated mode, you stand in front of your seat. So fundamentally, it's a seated area which we decide to lock the seats up, but with additional individual barriers, which form one straight barrier in front of the row of seats.
And let's just remind ourselves that this is actually quite common, for example, in the Bundesliga, isn't it?
It's very common. In Germany, for example, there's a number of variations on what we've put in terms of rail seats. We looked at them all, and rail seating we thought was the one for us.
Okay.
And of course, for UEFA games, as many of you will know, you're required to have an all-seated stadium. For these games, all we have to do is simply unlock the seat and let it fall down. And it doesn't, like a normal seat, spring back up again, it stays down. However, the truth of the matter is people still stand in the all-seated mode because that's what they want to do, but they're still protected in front and behind by a rail bar.
Yeah. So the next question then is whether you're planning to introduce rail seating to other areas of Celtic Park.
Well, I hope that will be the case. I mean, we were looking at it very carefully this year. All eyes are on it. The fans are very much aware of that. We've been delighted to welcome some clubs from England and Wales. I know that Ken and his colleagues have attended many games. I think Ken is actually an honorary member of the Green Brigade at the moment. He'll be getting his khaki jacket soon, I would think. But we've had lots of interest, and we're really keen to make sure this season works. And if that works again, we'll look at expanding it. And we also have to think of visiting fans as well.
Yes. Well, Sharon, I understand there are certain sensitivities around all this, but what are your fans telling you about persistent standing and whether there are any modifications to the design at the Emirates Stadium, or whether there's any further stewarding that could be introduced in order to stop people standing in their seats?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, as you say, I'm here for the FSOA, but also for Arsenal as well. And I think, and it's not just my own views on it, but my colleagues as well, is that for every engagement of fans asking their opinion, for every one that wants to stand, there will be those still that want to sit down as well. So it's about managing the expectations of everybody. New stadium designs, and certainly with the Emirates involved, obviously that was built 10 years ago, it wouldn't necessarily be that easy just to automatically put in a rail-seated solution that Ronnie's got.
Do you have an explanation for that? Why
it's really to do with the sight lines. Because it's a bowl, it doesn't really lend itself, certainly in the lower tier, to wherever you'd put it, you'd create that cross issue of sight line issues. Yes. So you definitely, it's not without the realms of being able to be done, but it's not as simple as I think there might be the perception. It's just a matter of taking out a block of seats and replacing it with rail seating. Now that might be possible in some stadia, but it's not necessarily possible in all.
To Sheila now, I mean, what is Newham's approach then to tackling the challenges at the London Stadium? And we've seen a lot of publicity about that, which is not necessarily connected with people standing in seated areas. There are other issues there as well. Seems to have quietened down a little bit now. I don't know whether that's whether the news media have got bored with it or what, but what is Newham's approach as a local authority?
It has quieted down now, I just
Okay.
want to say that. Obviously, our direct relationship is with the operator who holds the safety certificate, and they have put certain controls in. But it's more than that. It's about partnerships, and I know that's an overused phrase, but it is about everybody taking responsibility for their bit, because in the London Stadium, it's not West Ham that manages the stadium, but they manage the ticketing strategy. They have the information on the season ticket holders. So it really is working together, and with fans as well. It's about communication, it's about control measures, obviously, but it's also about consequences, because it is a minority of fans that do cause disturbance that can impact on stewards and on fans as well. There have been examples of assaults, of aggressive behaviour that are not acceptable, some related to persistent standing and some not.
Okay.
So it has to be clear that there are consequences to those people. And I think that Steve Riley mentioned earlier, there's been 148 bans, which is probably a record, I would imagine, in terms of any stadium. And 68 of those have had some element of persistent standing. But as I said, really what we call aggravated persistent standing. It's not persistent standing on its own. And as Sharon has said, that there are people that do want to sit. And there have been instances where individual fans have asked somebody to sit down, and that's led directly to a public order issue. So it's not just as simple as being public safety, it also leads to other issues as well that have been taken outside the stadium itself.
Yes. I should have mentioned at the outset here that we're very welcome to have your questions here. If you've got any questions you'd like to ask of any of our four panellists, then please just put your hand in the air and we'll get a roving microphone to you just as quickly as we possibly can. Just back to you, Sheila, for a minute. I mean, you've obviously got also the business of the World Athletics Championships coming, haven't you?
Yes.
This summer. So does that present any particular difficulties? I suppose not so much in the business of persistent standing. Would you expect athletics fans to do that? I mean, they might get quite excited, at the end of the 100 metres and they'd want to see...
Yeah. I don't know if they're the same celebratory jumping up of the seat that there is in football. I'm not quite sure about that. But no, it is an entirely different audience profile.
Yes.
There's not the same hard egress. West Ham are known for leaving the ground early as well. That doesn't tend to happen with athletics. It's an entirely different audience profile, to be fair. More families, although obviously, as I said earlier, with West Ham there are more families, and I think it's quite a different atmosphere where persistent standing is not really an issue.
Mm. Yeah.
Can I just add, Rob, that we've spent a lot of time today promoting the service element. We keep talking about safety, security and service. For me, the key issue is recognizing that football spectators aren't one demographic. It's made up of lots of different factions who like to come and do different things, which is why I think what Celtic have done is a really good initiative. They've identified the element that want to be more vocal in their support, and by doing that, they help to tackle the three tenets in our guidance, which was around safety, customer care, and keeping the aisles clear. So in doing that, and if you like, locating these people in one area, not only does it solve their wishes and their desires, but it also helps to flatten out problems in other parts of the ground.
Yes. So a question for all four of you, really, I suppose, in the absence of any questions from the floor, but please, just to remind you, we're very keen to take your questions. What is the way forward here? Ronnie, why don't I come to you? I mean, I've already asked you about whether you might install more rail seating, but I mean, we're not going to see Parkhead completely rail-seated, are we?
Well, I don't see that in the immediate future by any means, but I think the possibility for it to expand is there. I mean...
Throughout the Premiership, you think, in Scotland?
I think subject...
If clubs can afford it, I mean, that's also
subject to finance. I mean, it really is, in our case, roundabout, which is not huge money, particularly with some of the senior clubs in the Premiership, but around about 0.5 million investment in safety. But a big part of that is, just to pick up again from Ken's point, is the service element. I mean, the first thing started with people who were in that area who didn't want to stand. So you have to start with consultation with people who are sitting, but they really don't see themselves standing for 90 minutes or more, or want to be part of that fun section, if you like. So we had to think about how do we deal with these people, how do we keep them happy, and that took a consultation period. Yeah. The next was with the groups themselves. I mean, to give you some quick examples, the risk assessment for that area was written with all of our major fans groups, with an independent chair, and then eventually chaired by our SLO. Our SLO, supporter liaison officer, actually stands in that area on a match-to-match basis. We've identified key people in that area to talk to. We've built a capo stand, a la European style, where we allow them to conduct their own fan base from the area. And we have regular follow-up at the end of every game if it's required. At the end of every game, we put a report into the Safety Advisory Group, as do Police Scotland. And I'm happy to say all of the reports so far have been very, very positive. So some of the doubts that we had in terms of behavioural issues have really not come to fruition. The behaviour, if anything, because the fans have the ownership of that area, it's improved. And funnily enough, the 3,000-ish fans who stand almost cater, although we have a waiting list for the area, almost cater to the needs of our wider fan base. What I mean by that is you don't get standing elsewhere. That is seen as the standing corner. And if you're elsewhere in the stadium, you're expected to sit down.
Well, that's very interesting, isn't it? Because then people are taking a kind of example, as it were, from the 3,000 who are standing, and sort of see that as, well, that's their part of the stadium, and this is my part of the stadium, where actually it's not acceptable.
For sure.
And that's interesting, isn't it? Yes, yes. I mean, there's also an international dimension to all of this, isn't it, with UEFA and FIFA. Do you see any developments in that area at all?
In terms of...
Well, in terms of how UEFA and FIFA might, for the Champions League, for example, and for the World Cups, how they might actually go down the route of rail seating or other methods. I mean, it's not just in the UK that people are standing in their seats, is it?
No, there's potential for them to do that, and I think at the moment their requirement of matches that are played under UEFA or FIFA conditions is that the seat, as Ronnie mentioned, must be in the down position. The fact that people tie the seats back up with the green and white scarves to create the standing environment again is another issue, but as long as the condition is there, then that would be a question probably best directed to UEFA and FIFA.
Yes, yes. I mean, as far as Arsenal are concerned now, I mean, what sorry, Arsenal for you, and we've only really had one response. The way forward then for Arsenal in this issue?
I mean, for Arsenal and for all of my colleagues, you know, in England and Wales, I think, you know, we're at the point where we've been talking about this subject for such a long time as we started off with this panel, and I think the frustration of the fans is actually replicated within the clubs, within those responsible for safety, with the police, with everyone involved in football, in that we are still talking about this and we're not getting any definitive decision.
It's not going to go away, is it?
It's not going to go away, and we could still be talking about this in 3-5 years' time. So I think that, you know, within England and Wales, there needs to be some decision making. Because whilst we're in the situation where actually we can't do anything about it, we're going to carry on having persistent standing in all-seater stadia, and we can't do anything about it.
And the reason, or at least one of the reasons why it won't go away, is because there is a perception, rightly or wrongly, that a standing audience creates better atmosphere. And that would be fair, wouldn't it?
Certainly my experience, as Ronnie said, as an honorary member of the Green Brigade, that is my experience of standing amongst the crowd. That the atmosphere, I go back to supporting Sunderland from Roker Park when there was an atmosphere, and we'll not mention where we are now, but it does create an atmosphere. I think that perhaps the point that's worth reinforcing here is that whilst, and this is making a connection between persistent standing and Ronnie's solution of rail seating, is that whilst the government have reaffirmed that they are not minded to change government policy, they've also been quite clear to explain that they're watching very carefully what is happening at Celtic Park as part of the pilot.
Yes.
And we, as the government's technical experts, will be looking and reporting back to let them know the findings of that. So I think it's positive in terms of Sharon's comment. Yes, we do need to be doing something about persistent standing, because there are other things that are outlined in the document that we produced first in 2002, then refreshed in 2013, around potential solutions other than rail seating. Rail seating wasn't around when we first got together with the other groups to write this. But we need to, if you like, to reinforce that commitment, but also recognise that Ronnie's solution at Celtic Park is perhaps one of the options we need to also be looking at.
In terms of blue sky thinking here, is there anything else beyond rail seating?
I'm not aware of it. I think that clearly there is still an element that would like to see a return to terracing.
Yes.
And,
well, that's not going to happen.
Well, we do already, as a Sports Ground Safety Authority, advise on how to develop.
Yes, but I mean at the top level.
In the top levels, then again, it would be currently it would be in contravention of government policy.
Yes.
But I think the development of Celtic Park is interesting. It's a hybrid. Having stood there and had the experience of being in there when Celtic, having a free scoring season, have scored a number of goals, I can tell you that the experience of being there amongst a crowd didn't feel threatening when they were scoring goals, because there's no opportunity of anybody landing on my back.
Yes.
Because of the protection of the barrier front and back. So if you'd ask me, is it a safer experience than persistently standing in a seated area, then, I don't think I need to be a technical expert to answer that one.
This is your last chance for a question to the panel. A gentleman at the front here. The microphone's got to travel some 20 or 30 yards, and the gentleman is running. Oh, it looks like running. No, he's decreased to an amble. But he's a very fit-looking young man, so don't hold it against him.
I've got just a question for all the panel. Is there any aspect of the Celtic experience which does not translate directly to England and Wales? Is there anything particular about Scotland which says, well, we can't learn from that experience? That's the first part of it. And the second part of it is, having seen your rail seating and listened to you now twice, do we actually think this is a safety issue, or for us has it become a socio-political one?
Well, if I can say from our point of view, we agreed with the Safety Advisory Group that it was a safety issue. And having established that, we then look for control measures. So for us, the main driver is safety. Is it safer in rail seating areas than it was before? Yes. I don't think anyone disagreed with us as we went through the journey, and it was a journey to get there. One thing I would praise would be the Glasgow City Council, the SAG that we worked to, very, very carefully scrutinised what we wanted to do, and all credit to them for it. They did their job. And also a nod to the Scottish Government, who, although they don't have direct responsibility for stadia licensing, gave the nod of approval that they were, because they had listened to us, they were prepared to see this season take place. So I think the way forward for us is to keep monitoring, but all the news at the moment is good news. In terms of the situation, I guess, in England and Wales, primary legislation would be the stumbling block or the hurdle to overcome. And I think, if some of our experiences are studied, I hope there might be some support for it coming south of the border.
Morning, thank you. I did see, and there it is still, a hand raised at the very back. A brief question, if you wouldn't mind, and whoever it's addressed to, a brief answer too, if you wouldn't mind too.
No, this doesn't actually require an answer, because I don't want to embarrass Sharon. Just purely to make a statement. We listen.
You better say who you are then in that case.
Jill Dawson, Chelsea Football Club.
Okay.
We listen to all the eloquent discussions that go on, and we've learned very much, I think, probably from Celtic, from the German model. Our experiences of going to Germany and talking to my safety officer counterparts at German grounds, they're now concerned that the very intuitive supporters can unlock the seats, and now they're having to deal with supporters standing on the seats. I rest my case.
Well, we better have a response to that.
Can I just add a couple of points to that? I think from my perspective, having seen the installation at Celtic Park on a few occasions now, it's been extremely well thought out. It's been extremely well installed. But the key bit is the high level of safety management through Ronnie and his team in ensuring that it works. My experience of the German models is perhaps not quite the same as that. I'm not suggesting for 1 minute they aren't correctly installed, but quite often these areas are left to, if you like, to self-policing by the groups of people who are in there. The experience of Celtic is that where originally, Ronnie will correct me, originally 15 stewards looked after the area that was converted to rail seating. There are now 41 stewards there, and that's not because they're expecting an increase in antisocial behaviour or whatever. That's a customer care thing. And I think we're getting back to the theme, or one of the themes that's been running through this event today, and that's about understanding the behaviour and understanding the requirements of the fan in this third important key service element.
Well, Sharon, Ronnie, Ken, Sheila, thank you very much indeed for your contribution this afternoon. Oh, you've got one more point, very quickly.
Should anyone wish to visit Celtic Park, a number of you have already, either collectively as a group when we could arrange some sort of presentation for you, whether it's done through the FSOA or indeed the SGSA. If that was something you'd be interested in, you'd be very welcome. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Our panel, ladies and gentlemen. Well, I hope you feel this has been a worthwhile day. Plenty of interesting and instructive sessions within the key message of taking leadership in the crucial issue of sports ground safety. We've talked about the need to guard against complacency, the enemy of safety, and it was good to hear from the leaders of some of the major sports. Then, of course, the workshops. Those of you in here before lunch, you'll have heard about the latest developments in crowd monitoring via multifocal sensor technology. That's quite a mouthful, isn't it? That's within stadiums. And then, of course, the fascinating prospects. I must say I was really bowled over by this. The fascinating prospects for advising fans on their way in and out of stadiums about pressure points in the transport systems via apps on their smartphones. There's a hint of Big Brother a little bit about that, and also a concern expressed from the back of the room there about how this kind of information actually might get into the wrong hands. But this crowd-connected innovation has already been used in Los Angeles, and it may be coming to a stadium here in the UK very shortly. After lunch, I visited the workshop on counter-terrorism. Talk of threat fatigue. When the level remains at severe, how can staff be motivated to stay efficient and focused week in and week out? That's acknowledged as a serious issue, with inclusivity and teamwork regarded as a very high priority indeed. From the NFL in America came the idea of a clear bag policy, used already at Twickenham and Wembley to make bag searches more efficient. And from the fans' perspective, the message that football fans can be part of the solution in the issue of counter-terrorism, not part of the problem. 50,000 pairs of eyes and ears, just imagine that. There was a suggestion from Kevin Miles, he, you'll know, is the Chief Executive of the Football Supporters Federation, of the need for balance between secrecy and transparency. Don't leave, he said, a vacuum of information. Something else will fill it. And as we consider counter-terrorism, there's the message that the topic is no longer an appendix to any report, it's the thread of a report. Apologies, I didn't get to any of the other sessions, but judging by the applause that drifted over from behind the wall there, they were all very, very well received indeed. And we certainly all appreciated Aoife's lively presentation. So, thank you all very much for your involvement. Maybe some of you were already fully on message. Others maybe picked up ideas and suggestions which hadn't occurred to them. But either way, we're relying on you now, relying on you to take away sports ground safety as a priority and to cascade it down through your organisations. A number of you, it's fair to say, have come a very long way today, and we're very grateful for your interest and for your support. To bring together well over 200 people for this event suggests a keen interest in and acknowledgement of sports ground safety and its importance. Now then, the SGSA would be really grateful if you could provide feedback on what you thought about the day. So evaluation forms are available on the table, I believe. I think that's right, isn't it, Karen? Your views really do matter, so please take a few minutes to complete one and hand it into any of the SGSA team. Big thank you to the event supporters down there, who along with yourselves are helping to make this event sustainable for the future. Final farewell from me, and a big thank you for coming. Thank you very much indeed.